Tonight on Man Alive, what is the special spark that makes an older person a sage?
That's great.
Can it be learned?
Hello, I'm Michael McIver. In a culture that reveres youth, there's little room for the old. Their traditional role as elders, the repositories of wisdom, has disappeared. Now it seems that once people retire, they're expected to fade away from any active involvement in society. But is there an alternative? A way for our elders to be role models for the rest of us? A way for them to transform aging into saging?
Aging, the process and the being, is not for sissies. I have found that I have needed all the help I can get.
We're not excess. We have a lot to offer. And I know I have a lot to offer, and I have been offering, but I want to do more.
It seemed to me as I looked that I could treat everything that was happening to me as an unfortunate consequence of aging. The fact of being invisible, the fact of my body slowing down, the fact of things breaking more easily, the fact of people starting to infantilize me a little bit. I mean, all this absurdity. Or I could flip my perception and see it all differently as an interesting opportunity for growth. Every other way of looking at it treated aging as if it was an error on God's part.
What we are about to do the next couple of days, we are going deep into the system files in order to change something. The location of the word elder. Elder usually means, for most people, has something to do with old, like an old rag, like useless, like redundant, ready to be recycled and thrown away. And we want to shift that.
We are on the verge of an aging crisis. Thanks to advances in healthcare, we're living longer. The population is aging. And as the baby boomers reach their senior years, this demographic shift will become even more acute.
There's within my heart a melody.
The numbers of people who are getting older are increasing in proportions that never before on this planet have there been so many. And the question of their productivity is something that bothers people a lot. What would be the best public policy for them? And so, with the best of intentions, people have figured, let's take this redundant population, warehouse them as comfortable as we can keep them until they die off. First of all, it's a fantastic resource that's not being used right. Many of those people are still capable of doing other things. How important it is to lift the heavy veil from old age and to give it again that kind of joy.
For the last few years, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi has been lecturing and giving workshops on something known as spiritual eldering, or as he calls it, from aging to saging.
Each other and do it in groups of 2 and 3.
Since the 60s, when he was head of the Department of Near Eastern Studies at the University of Manitoba, he's been an influential, often provocative figure in Jewish spirituality. His interest in aging developed when he went through a crisis of his own about what role a spiritual teacher should play in his later years.
When I got close to my 60th birthday, I felt that I had to take a retreat at this point. I had to do some assessing as to where it come from, where do I have to go now, because it was clear to me that the models that I saw were not good models. And I felt that it would be so much better for a teacher to spend his remaining years to prepare for his transition and to model eldering and to mentor the upcoming generation with the additional and extended skills that their new position in leadership would require. So that sort of set itself up for me as a goal. This is what I need to do.
A sage is one who remembers. A sage is comfortable reflecting upon the meaning of life. A sage has a beginner's mind. A sage has opened the gifts. Rilke says, we all receive the gifts of love and death, but they are mostly left unopened.
He was one of the most influential thinkers of the mid-60s. Ram Dass, or Richard Alpert, Ph.D., as he was then known, was thrown out of the Harvard Psychology Department with Timothy Leary for experimenting with LSD. He went to India, came back a yogi, and wrote a number of best-selling books on spirituality. A few years ago, Ram Dass began grappling with the issues of aging. The exact moment was during a train journey when he bought his first ticket as a senior citizen.
And as he gave me the ticket, I said, how much is this? He said, $4.50. I said, what is the regular ticket? He said, $7. So I was very pleased. But then as he walked down the aisle away from me, and I held this, which said senior on it, I realized that in accepting this ticket, I was putting on a coat, and it was a coat that felt very strange. And it was a coat that it clearly didn't fit me or who I thought I was. And yet there was the society seeing me as a senior now. And I saw all of the strange, the coat came with a whole set of attitudes, opinions, feelings, a definition of what the mythology was of aging in our society. It all came in this coat I was putting on.
The key shift of perception is to see the aging population as a resource and a potential joy and contribution, and not as a social problem. And the entire political, economic, gerontological orientation of seeing aging as a problem is the problem.
It was natural for these two old warriors of the counterculture to band together in their golden years. They'd been friends since the 60s. They joined up for a weekend elder circle at the Omega Institute in upstate New York. Omega is a large human potential center offering hundreds of different workshops. There were many summer volunteers at Omega, like Jamie, a 24-year-old counselor. She was the youngest person in the elders circle.
One thing that I was really wanting in coming here was to cultivate some friendships with older females, because I think I have a lot to learn from them. And some of my closest friends at home are in their 40s and 50s. Just the way that people in our society treat the aging population really disturbs me.
The separation of the elders from the community is sad. I think with the long lives that we're living today, moving to another community, to better weather, to away from your family, is a frightening part of growing old.
For those who can't afford the move to better weather, the option is often a tiny apartment in a senior's residence. Helen Hopkins lives in one. She went to an aging to saging workshop with Rabbi Schachter during a difficult period in her life.
At the time, my brother was dying of cancer in Peterborough, and he just backed out of his life, scared to death, and wondered why me. Wouldn't talk to his wife, wouldn't talk to any of us.
Not wanting that to happen to her, she attended the workshop and became an activist.
I recognized that I should do something, and I came home and I started, my discussion group, and that now I'm going to be going down to the Metro meetings. They're coming from all the buildings like this, and there's an awful lot of buildings like this in Toronto, Hundreds of buildings, I couldn't believe it. I got the map, and there's all kinds. And they'll come and discuss things, and we'll bring back feedback. And then I'll call a tenants meeting here downstairs and bring back the feedback and talk about things, get people talking and thinking about where we should be going, what we should be doing.
We have to handle it ourselves. When we begin to do that, we see that there are options before us. There are many. And in fact, like the very troublesome moment when somebody has retired and the day after retirement takes hold, there's no office to go to, and there is such a wide menu in front of you of things you might be able to do, and you're paralyzed by the choices. You know what I mean? It's just too much. Where would you go to know what to do? You'd look for a model. Who has been there before? Who can show me what to do? Well, we have some models. Become a snowbird, go play golf, go to the senior citizens stuff, to the Golden Age Club. You have some models. Somehow these models seem to be models of obsolescence. It is like, what are we going to do if we're still alive? It's too soon to call Kevorkian, So let's go do something in the meantime,
When I retired, I found that all of the avenues that were open just seemed not right for me.
How are you?
So when I came to Omega, in a very natural process, I interacted with these younger women. And of course, you have to understand that 40, 45, 50 is still a very, very young woman to me.
How are you?
Sylvia Beitcher is 77 years old. She came to Omega for a program 6 years ago and realized that she'd been here when she was 14, when it had been a summer camp. She liked Omega so much she started working here during the summer and eventually bought a trailer just down the road. Here she lives alone by a pond, teaching herself drumming, eating healthy, walking 4 miles a day, and doing a strenuous regimen of yoga that would be difficult for most people regardless of their age.
That's great.
What came to me was that what I'm doing is I'm a role model. I mean, women of 45 begin to get worried about the aging process. And when they look at me at 77 and see me walking and drumming and swimming and dancing and just, being so alive, it really makes them feel good. It gives them courage. And then they begin to think of, how shall I live now? What shall I do with my diet? What shall I do with my exercise? What shall I do with my mental attitude? So being a role model is a real contribution that I feel that I can make. And I have an extraordinary influence now over so many wonderful women. I'm really proud of that relationship. And it is an extended family for me. It's delicious, absolutely delicious.
Extended family, long fibers. Imagine a time when 3, 4 generations lived under one roof. In a way, that's how nature expects us to be. The fibers of time. You know what I mean by fibers? You can't spin anything unless the fibers are long enough to grab hold of one another. The fibers have gotten very, very short. And if I were to take wool and chop it up into tiny little pieces, I couldn't spin a thread from it.
Hi, I'm the youngest, and I'm 24. You're close. And oh, sorry. I wanted to talk yesterday, but I thought, well, what do I have to teach these people? So I just listened. And but people have been asking thank you, Mary. People have been asking my friend Tony and I why we're here. You know, what made us be here? And I don't really have a real specific answer. Because I think it's things that have happened to me my whole life. Going into the nursing home at where my great-grandmother was staying, and I had no voice or say, and that I thought it was terrible that she was there, and that they had her on all these drugs that make her scared and say, I'm scared, Jamie, don't leave. And saying, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, over and over and over again.
It's kind of interesting that the only issue that I really haven't resolved in my mind is how I will die gracefully. I know how to live gracefully, but I really want to learn the process of how to control how I die, so that I don't want to go through the pain, and I don't want to be a burden. And so that really is a whole issue that has to be worked out.
We have to get to the next stage where we can be the next phase of who we have to become. That's not so easy because of the freak out. Where's the freak out? Ever since we were born, we have been operating with a program that says, you gotta save life at any cost. You gotta save life at any cost. You gotta save life at any cost. You mustn't die, you mustn't die, you mustn't die. And you can see how important that program is. That's how we survived. So part of what eldering calls for is to dismantle the freak out. And to be able to say, I have come to terms with my mortality. I know that my moment will come when I will leave the old wreck of a car and get out. And that's so important, to be able to imagine for ourselves the time that we are going to die, and to say that's okay. Because being born, we bought that ticket to dying too. I don't have the sense that we can do the work that we need to do in the world as elders if we can't look that in the face.
It's difficult for me because until I was 70, I didn't even know the word spiritual, really. I had never thought in those terms. And I've been a pragmatist, a realist, and a radical all of my life. And black was black and white was white, and there really were no in-betweens. And so the whole spiritual aspect is a new path that I'm beginning to follow and trying to understand. And I have great difficulty.
People ask, why do you use the word spiritual for the work in eldering that you do, to call it spiritual eldering? And there is that part in which a person crossing the threshold into eldering asks him herself, what is this all about? Why is there something rather than nothing? And the notion of who is God and what is God has by that time matured a lot from the cosmic Santa Claus or the cosmic cop, and there is a whole other sense of awe around that. And making sense of life in relation to that, and wanting to stay in a contiguous connection, being embraced by that, and yielding into that, so that at the moment of passing into death, one can relax and say, I'm glad to have participated in that cosmic show that's taking place. That's remarkable. And that's why it is spiritual. It isn't quite religious in the same way as we talk about religion. It has something to do with being integral to nature. And it is the great yea saying to having been created and having been part of it all.
When I was 50, I had cancer, and that turned my life around because I realized that I could not maintain the pressure in my business and that I had to become more aware of my body and its well-being. And so many people will say that cancer or some really life-threatening illness was the best thing that ever happened to them, because it makes you very, very aware of how precious life is, and it makes you conscious. And I became very conscious when I developed my cancer. What's so extraordinary about the drumming is that if my mind happens to wander for a moment, it stops the whole pattern. As we get older, we begin to get lazy mentally. This is an enormous stimulation for the mind. You have to focus and concentrate completely on what you're doing. And after you drum for any period of time, you get up, and I just begin to fly. I'm so energized. I go, oh, kind of thing. So this is a real passion that I have now, and I'm so pleased to be passionate at this age. Mama, Papa.